Okay, so today we are excited to welcome Ellen Koronet as our speaker. Ellen is an applied anthropologist with over 40 years of experience transforming behavioral data into tools that drive deeper customer insight. I know one of her specialties that I really appreciate, Ellen, is how she gamifies her approach. And I know that Ellen will probably tell us a little bit more about her background as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Ellen.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I get the right one up. So, hello. And today I actually changed the title of this a few times. I was talking about tick box personality typing, and it's really just binary personality typing that we want to get away from in our culture and belonging strategies, everything we do, right? So let's see if I can get it to switch to the focus today is on personality typing, but I'm going to kind of touch on a lot of different ways we can use our tools to reach out and continue the flow of conversation between any organization and the people out there, between each other, and it goes internally too. When we ask the kinds of questions that allow us not to put ourselves into boxes. We get out of our heads and into our hearts, and that's where we want to be. So, I mean, we need to balance it. And it's not really balance, it's all about flow. So, the history of personality typing really fast is it goes way back to those Greek philosophers on human behavior. And then Kant came along and he has four temperaments. And then in the 1920s and 30s, notice there's like a couple of hundred years in there. Freud and Jung got into a big fight and a big argument, and they all started to come out with different ways of sort of understanding the way we think and behave. And then in the 50s and 60s, that started to explode into all of these typing tools that we've now got that can be very, very useful. However, language really matters, people. The words we use to describe ourselves and others set expectations. And the more expectations we set, and then we keep hearing it, the more bounded we become in those identifiers. And that becomes problematic because personality types are labels, like the label you get on a can of soup, right? And the label informs you, it tells you what's inside. It gives you an idea of how you're going to use it or how you're going to interact with it. So we have these go-to preferences for how we interact with each other. And when you put a label on it, like I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm an anthropologist, I am all these things. And that can give us a really good idea of how to interact with people and how to bridge some gaps. And you know there's a but coming, right? Because they have these roles and ways of connecting both internally and externally can really become confining. And I put two of the biggest ones up here because these to me are very problematic. And it isn't that they're not brilliant and useful in the right hands, it's that they're very oppositional. When you're taking one of these personality typing assessments, you have to say, are you more agreeable or less agreeable? Are you more of an introvert or more of an extrovert? And a lot of people end up in the middle because none of us are averages. We don't live in the middle. We move back and forth. In certain situations, we'll pull on certain traits. Now, not to say that there aren't some people who really are extroverted most of the time. Like there really are some strong preferences. But what we need to do is stop pushing people to one side or the other. So, just kind of to give you a guideline when you're looking at an assessment that you might want to use that's already out there, because there are some really good ones. So, the validated assessments can often be true. This is sort of a psychological therapeutic concept. When you ask yourself, I really feel terrible about this thing. Well, that could be very true, but it may not be very real. And that's especially without understanding the nuances behind it. So you get to true but not real when you're being forced to make a choice, either or rather than yes and. When you're pushed into false dichotomies, when it's one-sided and not contextual, if it's asking you, do you ever feel drained after social events? What, do you prefer quiet time alone to going out with a group? So I mean, those are a little bit contextual, but it needs to be equally represented and give you the choice to explain yourself and define yourself quickly and easily. Also, we always want to avoid aspirational bias, which means I don't want to tell you no because I want you to see me that way, and big globalizations. So those are the kinds of things to watch out for if you're evaluating one that's already there. And now, this is a little transition moment. I'm going to talk about the bigger picture of how I've designed a methodology that allows us to really move back and forth between the respondent in the marketing research world and the brand. So the convergence point of all these social sciences that we've got access to is the um, is the meeting of sociology, anthropology, psychology, organizational psychology or behavior, and political science. Those are the big five in my mind. And each one has an approach and a bunch of benefits and maybe some pitfalls as well. So, like sociology is looking at infrastructure and systemic interaction, and anthropology is all about storytelling and the artisanal expression and the cultural nuances that go on around us. Psychology gets into the mind and coping strategies and transformation. Organizational psychology looks at that from a group interaction or an institutional kind of approach. And then political science, and I used Claude to visualize this. I had the idea already, and Claude helped me. And every time I asked it about political science, it kept coming up with the same things. It couldn't it couldn't go into more detail about the specific structures or benefits of approaching something from a political science point of view. And when I met a couple of political scientists this last few days at a conference, they actually agreed that it's a little more nebulous than the rest. So where it all comes together is when we can put together the kinds of scaled attitudinal questions that help people put themselves quickly and easily into context. We're coming out with input and insight that we can use to give the whole person insight, to be scalable, because we can send this out to lots and lots of people, and they find themselves, instead of being put into a segment, they actually are putting themselves onto our scales and our flowing kinds of constructs. And then we get strategy that's grounded in the lived reality. And the really key thing to this, whenever you're designing anything where you're going to be asking people questions and then doing something with it, is you have to make sure that they're not spending a lot of time trying to figure out how they fit. So you want it to be relatable and easy to put into context. So using this convergent technique, I experimented with deconstructing introvert versus extrovert, because that to me was the easiest one to attack right away. And I've been doing research on this for a couple of years, and I'm finding new patterns in those old definitions. There indeed are introverts and extroverts out there, and I've coined a new term, and it's called flexiverts. And the flexiverts are, all of us are on some level a flexivert. So I'm going to show you just a quick little bit from the early findings that I was getting, and now I'm updating it. So these numbers are shifting a lot, but the number of introverts, of really truly strong introverts, is very large, and the number of extroverts is actually very, very small. And this goes contrary to what a lot of the research has shown so far because it's forcing people one way or the other. And then this flexiver group, this is growing now. I've changed the definition a little bit, but the point is that somewhere down the middle, there really is a group of people who is much more comfortable being introverted and a group that has some level of extroversion. That's kind of the key thing there. Also, you have to understand that I started this where I am. So there's a lot of women in my age bracket in this group. So the real research will come out later. But for now, I think this is a really excellent starting place. And the biggest finding that I've got here is instead of forcing people one side or the other, when I toggle and allow them to look at both qualities at the same time, what I find is that people who are stronger on the extroversion, so this was a score of 72 out of 100, also have quite a bit of introversion preference in there. So it's not an either or. It's an absolute, I need times to go inside and refresh. But I do love being up on a stage and in a crowd, and I also get energized when I'm in a group. And you'll see by the word cloud here, we were talking about word clouds earlier, that there's a lot of very high energy, very fun, very out kind of words in there. And what's really interesting is when you look at the introverts, who I'm calling reflective, you get a lower level of extroversion along with their high level of introversion. So there, it's a stronger dichotomy. It's not, the numbers on this version are not as striking as what I'm finding, but you get the idea. It's we're really moving towards this understanding that you can nurture your introversion and not have to give up your extroversion. But when you're extroverted, you need more introversion. So this is one way of redefining something that's been very dichotomous. And here the words are more, being, time, group, need, lot, crowd around gets smaller. Alone is very big in this group. And then we have our flexiverts. And this is very interesting. I expected the people who were equally strong on both or equal on both, the numbers would come down a bit, but they're actually very high. So when you are able to be flowing with your definition of yourself and really react to situations as they come up, you end up with a high level of both. And I think that's a wonderful place to be. And here you'll see the words are both. We've got alone is pretty big. We also have need, feel, people out. Pretty big. So how do we do this for ourselves? And now I'm going to talk about a platform that I love to use that I'm happy to share with people, and also the way that you can design these kinds of things or work with the ones that you're working with so that you're really embracing people and allowing them to be where they are. So creating a response flow insight tool. The bigger the question, the better. So that means don't do all multiple choice. And if you're doing a multiple choice, don't push people into categories that they may or may not be able to relate to. Along with that is almost never use very binary, yes, no questions. You're going to get very little insight from that. They do have their place. Sometimes it's very helpful or to use like a tick box, but you don't want your whole instrument to be designed around those kinds of forced choices. Um, Feel free to play, to get some color in there, to use humor, to use story, to use metaphors. And you can use scenarios, but you don't want them to be outside the realm of a lot of people's experience. So you have to use them in a limited way. When I'm doing lead magnet quizzes for big brands, if we're using scenarios, it will be related to the use case. So we want to put people in a situation where they can make a choice that's relatable. Scales, I used to use these binary scales, are you more like this or more like that? And now what I'm really finding is it's always a good idea to break them up and allow people to go up or down on each side. So scales help people find themselves. You just don't want to force the false choice. And as I just said about being relatable, don't put people in hypothetical hypotheses. So here is an example of the introvert extrovert. This is the actual study that I'm still running. And on the platform that I use, it's called involve.me, and I have an affiliate link that I can give you so that I can nurture you through using it. They are evolving very, very fast right now and coming out with all kinds of new enhancements like the ability to graph your results on the last page. But for now, you would go through the whole quiz. And I have, I think I might be able to, no, it's not going to let me do it because I have to fill in after you get the explanation, you can put your opt-in up front or at the end. And I've got my newsletter being optional, but you do need to agree to the processing of information. So I'm not going to take you through the whole survey, but at the end, you end up with two different screens. If I'm more introverted, I'll get the introvert screen. If I'm more extroverted, I'll get the extrovert screen. And I do these with 5 to 8 often, well, maybe sort of 3 to 8 different categories of people, or we can do it on a scale where it's low, medium, and high, and they get a very personalized answer at the end. So this is the Culture and Belonging Strategies Network survey that we will now be running at the end of each of these speaker series. And this one is the one for my talk today. So I don't have a video up yet, but when you come in here and click it, and as you'll notice, this is very brandable. We can, on a bigger screen, you'll see all of the CBSN colors around there, the logo, all of that is in there. And on this page, we can actually embed the video. So if you didn't get a chance to watch it yet, you'll have a chance. And then you begin the survey, and we can, customize all of this sort of very interactive way of describing it. I'm going to say I'm excellent. And there will be plenty of opportunities to write in your answers. So, the way you can learn more about this is have a chat with me. I'm going to give you all kinds of links in the group that we're in, and we can talk about how to ask the big questions, how to use a platform like this, whatever you want to chat about. And now we are ready for Q and A. Did I say that slowly enough? Thank you for listening.
Okay. I guess I should have used my little react applause. I don't know where my react applause went. There it is. Okay. Yay. Thank you, Ellen. Who has a question?
Of course,
I can
I have a
start.
question.
Yeah, I have a
No,
You
question.
go
go, Kimmy.
ahead.
You go. Go,
No,
Kimmy.
I went first the last time. You guys
Question.
go. I go to the back of the line.
Oh, I was just trying to make sure that we gave her some. So yeah, I was just curious, Ellen. So like, I love spectrums. I call them spectrums. Is that what you mean by scales? Like,
Yes.
because I talk about in the Anthro Minute, for example, I talk about ethnocentrism being on one end of a spectrum from cultural relativism, and then there's shades of gray in between. Is that what you mean?
Yes, but you have to be very, very cautious because spectrums end up, it's sort of a forced choice. Some of them work really well, like that one is probably a good one. But a lot of times people put in when I did a survey of when I did a lot of research on all the introvert extrovert quizzes that are out there or assessments that are out there, most of them do yes, no. They do either or. A lot of them tried to put it on a spectrum. They called it a spectrum, but you were still trying to choose between the two, and you had no chance to say, it depends on the context. It depends on how I woke up that morning. It depends on how old I am. I mean, we change as we grow older. We learn to adapt to things, right? So when it depends, you don't want a spectrum scale. When there's an it depends, you're on the wrong track. You need to break them up. So that would be my cautionary note about that. And I've learned that slowly over time because I started that way.
Yeah, I'm curious, Ellen, it's an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Uh, I'm very curious about this topic related with children and how, because I see so many times the the harmful impact of labeling them, especially in schools, in classrooms. It's so comfortable for adults to label children. This is the lazy one, this is the conflicting one, this is the introvert one, this is the extrovert one, this is blah, blah, blah. And I'm curious about your thoughts about this process of building labels that children assume as as their own description of their personality during the rest of their lives sometimes because it's so powerful to describe Carl or whatever is very introvert and is a kind of whole level. So have you experienced in this regard about the evolution from childhood times to adulthood relate with this topic and how affect the personality and how affect the character and the behavior and the actions because it's
Absolutely.
so powerful. I mean, I see this confronting with what you are sharing with us, that is something very fluid. And in the reality is you can be at the same time both. I remember a conversation with a 10 years old girl and she explained as today I'm shy but also I'm very excited at the same time and I'm very and she was thinking that it's perfectly fine and compatible to be at the same time both, something that from the adult perspective is so difficult. So just to know a little bit about your thoughts.
So, when I've spoken about this at conferences, I spend probably good 15 minutes talking about how we assume labels.
Mm,
And the idea is, when you start out, you're just a child, whatever, reacting to everything, and you're more internal, right? It's more of an
mm,
internal
mm,
experience.
mm,
You're just
mm,
reacting, you're immediately reacting, very few filters. As we grow older, we learn all of those things you just talked about, and then we become more um, uh, structured in the way that we think about ourselves and others. And so I'm not quite sure how we can disrupt that
mm,
or how we can nurture parents and teachers to be a little more to be more careful with their language. It all starts with language. And
mm.
as soon as you start, like the word lazy is the one that jumped out at me when you were giving the examples. I have friends who tease their children all the time or who are frustrated
Mm,
with their children and they just call them lazy. And I keep telling them,
mm,
find another way to say that. You're doing so much damage. And the more you repeat it, the harder it is to get away from it. And then becomes repeated internally, and there we are. But another way to maybe start to disrupt this on a more on a bigger level is to have these fun interactive kinds of get to know you games, like
mm.
the improv games, things like that, and or a quiz like this, where you know you can train the institutional starting points, or
Mm,
the touch
mm.
points, maybe train the touch points. Yeah.
Because this is also related with authenticity. I mean, I have seen this so many times in children. The agreement is I put a level of introvert, extrovert on you, and the outcome or the consequence is you are admitted in the family, in the group. So you need to be not what you are, you really are. So it's a question of identity to this extrovert. Is so important the language. I'm so agree with you, Ellen. We are not aware how incredibly powerful is language creating reality and transforming people, and how this is especially serious in Western culture. In maybe in Eastern culture, they are much more aware about the importance of the language. But how important is to use these terms extrovert introvert in an appropriate way, not as a weapon or as a descriptor, but as another thing, and have like a kind of tools to manage properly these descriptions and definitions, and to be aware, especially by adults, in the use of this language. So I think this
Yeah.
research you are doing is so important.
Yes, and I think that play is one way in. And so,
Exactly,
people like
exactly,
what you're doing
exactly.
is equally important.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. And there were a couple other questions.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Lucy.
Uh, Thank you, Camilla. I was, you know, I have seen personality tests be used for like mitigating conflict at work, right? Like getting people to understand their differences and just say like, oh, maybe they don't hate me, they're just introverted, right? Like things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about like how changing that from a binary system to something more complicated can be used in those kinds of situations, or generally for like managers who are seeking to create more like inclusion in their teams?
Yeah. I think the easy fix is to not use any assessment tool or workshopping, construct that didn't get away. This is a very old school way of thinking. And, it started with Freud and Jung, and we're all still kind of using those constructs. So the place to start is to use something like Strength Finders or DISC, or, you can look at the different assessment tools, and some of them are more, at least they're on what Melissa called a spectrum, and not quite as binary. And then, bring in people who make sure that the person who is leading the exercises and the goal of bringing people together is more humanistic and more, according to the culture and belonging strategies network approach, right? Really, that, because what we're doing in this organization is encouraging each other to make a big dent in the sort of masculine or patriarchal thinking that's out there. So anytime you can make it more playful and more inclusive and give people a chance to express themselves without the labels, you're gonna be getting there.
Oh, thank you so much. That really is a good way to put it.
Jamie, you've been so patient.
Because I usually have 50 trillion questions. That's why. Um, so here's one of my questions is, I know you were saying you were doing some research. Where can we get more information regarding maybe any completed research that you've done? I think you said this one is still in process.
Yeah, and I mean it'll never be complete. I'm going to keep
Okay.
doing it.
Okay. Okay.
But yes, I can set up a chat with me and then
Okay.
I'll put something together for you. I have to
Okay.
update the report, but I delivered it first at IIEX 2 years ago, and I have a video about that. So I can show you that. There's a little more in there. But the really deep, interesting stuff, yeah, I can share that with you. But probably
Okay.
we should start with a chat.
Got it. Okay.
And
Okay. And
and
the other.
and I'll
Mhm.
keep publishing. I'll publish it as I get further along. I didn't want to make it too big a deal about it when I only had, a couple hundred women. I want to be able
Yeah.
to look a little deeper across cultures, across
Gotcha.
personalities, across genders, so I'm still looking for more data. So one way you can help is spread the quiz.
Gotcha. Are
And
you going to attach it to this? Are we going to include that
yeah,
in the YouTube too? So if they want to, if anyone who watches this wants to
absolutely.
complete that, they can do it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'm putting that in the chat too. So yeah, there's a lot of links, and I didn't want to put too many like right in the presentation because it gets confusing. But so what's in the chat now is the last one I just put in is the Flexivert quiz, the current one, and right before that is the feedback link.
Okay. Yeah, I really like the chart that you put up with the intersectionality between sociology and anthropology, psychology, those things like that. I think that was really good. What it made me think about as you were talking about this is how certain words are used to stereotype people. And I think one of the examples that you used was laziness. And is my question would be, is there a difference between, say, stereotypical acts or behaviors versus what we're talking about here in terms of non-binary, or how would you address that particular item?
I'm not sure in what context you or what you're asking.
Well, when we're thinking about um, how do I say this, I don't know, with certain cultures, maybe there's stereotypical words that may be associated with that, which it sounds like when you're stereotyping them, you're putting them into a box. But with these non-binaries, you're still able to address something like that, but it's not necessarily
Right.
boxing them in. Um,
Exactly. Yeah, so that's the whole mission behind everything I'm doing, whether it's for a corporation, an organization, a nonprofit, or an individual coaching somebody, is to stop, is to get to the preference that's underneath it. So I have a
okay,
preference for, so maybe a good way to do this would be if I show you some of let me pull it up real quick. I can put this up. Where did I put it? I had it all. Oh, here it is. Okay, great. I'm gonna share an example of how we can uh, pull away from stereotypes to back into preferences. So this is right out of the Flexivert quiz. In
okay,
conversation, I can be somewhat quiet, at least at first. I do not do well with too much small talk. That's a
okay,
standard introvert. That's a standard introvert measure. But at the same time, I have a tendency to process what I'm hearing quickly. I have a perspective to offer. So what I did was I paired some of these attitudes together. And,
Mhm.
you know, you could be high on both, you could be high or low. And it's not really a trade-off. These are two different things. But so that's how we can break up the stereotypes, is by asking for the preferences, asking for the nuances, asking for the situations, you know. Let's see if I have to click on something to get it to go to the next one. I often prefer to be self-reliant and independent, or I often prefer to interact with others, bouncing ideas and opinions back and forth. So you see how I'm not stereotyping you, right?
Mhm.
And that's the whole mission behind all of this. It really is to break up those constructs.
Got it. Thank you.
I know
And
we're at time and people
also
probably
use
have,
playful skills. Also use playful scales.
yeah, I like that. I know we're at time and I know I have to drop and probably other people do too, but I just want to say that was really interesting. I'm super excited to hear more about it. And I don't want to take everybody's time right now, but sometime, Ellen, if you want to chat about this whole power of language thing, I would love to, because that is the whole basis for the leadership course that I used to teach at Clemson that I did not design. It was designed by a whole collective of scholars. So, but very much supports what you're talking about. So, anything else for the good of the order before we say goodbye? And I believe Bernadette is up next month. Is that right? Because she swapped with Ellen, right? So,
Yeah, I think that's right.
yeah,
It is correct.
cool. Yay. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing everybody next month, if not sooner.
Thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank you very much. Take
Thank you.
care. See you. Bye.
Bye.